Okay, so this was one of probably my first commissioned set work for a competition. It was actually commissioned for the 1973 regional qualifying championship section. Again, championship section of the national competition in the UK. And from that point of view, again, if one's often asked as a composer, okay, when you write what's called a test piece, personally I don't like that because it seems to suggest a test piece is a different form of music to anything else that exists, and it's not. It's just a piece of music that is a set work for a competition. So, but if I say what are the reasons for writing a set work, a test piece? Well, it is obviously to challenge the bands. I come back to the fact that we have to challenge them technically and musically. So to write a championship section piece, I obviously had to challenge them technically. And at the time, again, 1973, Martin, this was a real challenge. But to compare it with Connotations, which we've talked about, which I said was this thing about quartal harmony, if we return to triadic harmony, and not just a simple major triad, but if you then may turn it into a minor triad, and then you come up with 11ths and 13ths harmony, which is, you're getting into jazz kind of harmony, etc. It's not quite like that, but it is the opening of this, as you remember, is quite dramatic. Very sort of dramatic. As to the title, interesting. When I wrote this piece, I was under contract to R. Smith and Company with a gentleman called Geoffrey Brand, who was a well-known figure in the brass band world. He'd come back into the brass band world after having been at the BBC for a while in London. And he took over R. Smith, and he took over the national competition. And again, I was under contract to him to write for about 6 or 7 years. And so this piece, with which he commissioned for the regional competition, so I finished it, etc. It's what you do when you're a professional composer. What do you want? All right, we want a 12-minute work, please, for this level, blah, 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 right? I produced it. It was called Symphonic Study. That was it. Symphonic Study for brass band. Geoffrey saw it. He said, I like the music. But he said, brass bands like something with a proper title. I said, what do you mean, Jeff? Proper title. So he said, oh, something with a program, So I said, well, I mean, it is a symphonic study. But he said, well, could you think of something that we could call it as well? So then I looked at it and I thought, well, okay. Sort of fanfare. So, okay, what kind of does that suggest? And then if you go into the big slow section, it's a kind of love song, quite romantic. And then the idea of chivalry came to me because it's got that element as well. So I thought, okay, well, let's think about calling it after something which in English history is one of the most important eras, the Plantagenets, which takes us to the War of the Roses, the battle between Lancashire and Yorkshire. And for those who don't know in English history what that is, they're two wonderful counties in the north of England where actually all the battles used to take place between these two elements of the monarchy to see who was going to be in charge, basically. Anyway, it was about from the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries that this Plantagenet era was. So I called it the Plantagenets. And now, of course, people don't call it symphonic study anymore. They just say, oh, do you know that piece, the Plantagenets? Anyway, that's what it is. So it is quite a dramatic piece. It is quite programmatic, actually, to be honest. So it's not sort of too distant. And it does have these elements of kind of what a competition piece does. It's got solos. It's got an interesting solo in the slow section from figure 6, those who have a score, because the first big solo is for tenor horn. And that was quite unusual in those days. I mean, you didn't used to have, it was the cornet or euphonium, sometimes the trombone, but not really the tenor horn very much. So anyway, I decided that basically this piece would have a tenor horn solo, which it does, and I think it's quite romantic in a way because of the tertial harmony. That sort of idea. It's quite sort of lush harmony, and so that didn't. And then you do have a cornet solo, of course, with a euphonium solo with it, and then it goes into quite a kind of robust fugue. Now, I should say that one of the things in my music, which is there from the very earliest, but which is obvious from this piece, certainly, and then in connotations, is the idea of fugal writing, which if you think, going back to Bach, you know, preludes and fugues and the great organ pieces, toccata and fugues. A fugue is one of those tools that a composer uses. It's basically the idea of one thematic element and then being mirrored in 3 or 4 different ways by the entries of the same theme and developed in that way. And so that's how it works. And then it comes back not with the beginning of the work, but the whole big climax at the end is where the love theme comes back. So it's back to the troubadours, you could say. I think that top, you can't play that sort of with lots of vibrato. It sounds silly. So I think that's, again, slightly more orchestral style. But all the thematic stuff is really quite romantic. And I think one's looking for a lovely, warm kind of brass band style of playing, I think. This piece, particularly, of all the pieces that have been chosen, I think is the most romantic of the brass band pieces and can be played in a truly romantic style of brass band playing. Yeah.